The O'Reilly Factor is on tonight.
You're offering me a job?
That's right.
Wow, okay.
Maybe the president should take the gig. With White House scandals mounting, President Obama ramps up his fundraising blitz across the U.S. Has he totally disengaged from running the country? We'll debate it.
But don't you think that the reason that ISIS was created was because when Saudi hijackers attacked us, we invaded a different country that had nothing to do with it?
Ah, she's America's sweetheart. Rosie O'Donnell, a notorious 9/11 truther, blames America for the creation of ISIS. And she's got plenty of company on the far left. We will analyze that tonight.
How to manage, how to be able to contain it. Wherein you find deaths all over. It is beyond our capability.
Battling the Ebola outbreak on the front lines in West Africa. Is there any hope of stopping it when so much of the world is failing to step up? We will tell you. Caution! Pointing is fun. The Factor begins right now. I'm Greg Gutfeld in for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Panic, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. On a flight from Philly to somewhere better than Philly, an idiot told fellow passengers that he had Ebola, causing the plane to sit for hours as men in hazmat suits came to pull the creep off. What a metaphor for the media. A sweaty entity that knows fear gets eyeballs. After all, Ebola is way more interesting than the rotavirus, which kills thousands of children daily. Now, that goofball on the plane got hauled away, but the hysterics in the media get to stay. Take Joan Walsh, who blamed Thomas Duncan's death on Rick Perry's Texas. I blame that idiocy on Joan Walsh's brain. Now, disease is spread by many things, but hysteria is every bit as contagious. And a mother pulling her kid out of school in Dallas has a greater risk of getting in a car accident than the kid getting sick. And we don't help by describing anyone who coughs as having Ebola-like symptoms. The Dallas deputy who had Ebola-like symptoms has now tested negative. As flu season arrives, Ebola-like symptoms will be as common as flu-like symptoms because, for the most part, they look alike. So take a breath and remember Flight 370, where 239 people disappeared. We yapped till we were blue in the face on that story. Then we stopped. The moral? If you worry about Ebola now, remember, something worse is coming your way, like the Sex and the City sequel. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight. The U.S. military arrives in West Africa to help fight the Ebola outbreak. 300 U.S. troops are now on the ground in the Liberian capital of Monrovia, the center of the outbreak. Up to 3,000 are set to be deployed this year to help build medical centers for Ebola patients. It's a noble humanitarian campaign, to be sure, but will it put our troops at risk? Joining us from Dallas, Katrina Pearson of the Tea Party Leadership Fund, and from Austin, Marjorie Clifton, a Democratic consultant and strategist. So, Katrina, let's begin with you. Should we be sending troops to Africa to deal with the Ebola outbreak?
Well, I'm going to say absolutely not. We really don't know what we're dealing with here. We're being told on one hand by officials that this is the Ebola virus, we know how to contain it, it's not that contagious, yet we're sending the U.S. military. We don't know what strain of Ebola virus we're even dealing with in Africa and here in Texas.
All right. Well, Marjorie, my concern is if America doesn't go, then it gets worse because basically we're the only country who can do this kind of thing right.
Well, I think we do have some of the best healthcare systems in the country, and we do have incredible support. Even with our military goes into a lot of different humanitarian situations to aid. So I think, you know, if we can be helpful, absolutely, why wouldn't we be? And it does have implications globally if it isn't contained. I agree with you about the hype. I think we need to keep it all in check. I mean, it's sort of a little bit reminder of the 1970s, 80s HIV outbreak. It's hard to contract Ebola. It's not as simple as being coughed on an airplane, and absolutely any lunatic on an airplane that, that decides to claim they've got it could be a problem. But I think we do need to keep it all in perspective and understand what it really is and be helpful in the ways we can in countries that really are suffering.
Well, yeah, speaking of this lunatic who made the Ebola joke, he got off the plane first. That's a terrible lesson to give everyone, that if you want to get off the plane first, just say you have Ebola. I might try that. Let me ask you, Katrina, how do you think the media is handling this? For example, when someone is going to get tested, that's generally a big story. And when that person turns out to be negative, instead of being on the front page, it's now on page 20, and you need a magnifying glass to find it. Do you think that the media is being slightly irresponsible?
Oh, absolutely. There is no question there's a lot of hype that's surrounding this case. I mean, we are still within the grace period of other candidates being identified, maybe they contracted it. But the point is, and yes, I agree there's hype, but for those of us who live right here, what's being considered ground zero, it needs to be taken very seriously, considering we don't know what strain it is and we don't know who's been contacted. I mean, Marjorie, do you know what strain we have here in Dallas County? The answer is no. There are 5. We need to know which one, because it makes a huge difference.
Well, I think, you know, one of the problems with people ginning up panic, when you say don't panic, other people will say, well, that's easy for you to say because you're not there. But I think it's actually harder to say don't panic, because people respond to panic faster, and I think it feeds into a political notion as well. For example, Marjorie, you're seeing this on the right and the left. On the right, you have people linking Ebola to President Obama, and here you have Joan Walsh linking Ebola to Rick Perry. Why do they do that?
Naturally. You know, that's hard to say. That's like saying President Bush caused Katrina.
Right.
Obama obviously didn't cause Ebola. And I think that a lot of times I do think that we as the media do create a vehicle for hype. And now, given that the media is every person in pajamas writing a blog, you know, people want an explanation for things. They want things to talk about. I mean, why do people watch reality TV shows with, you know, crazy families that are dysfunctional? It's because it's entertaining. But I do agree. We have to be cautious about what the scare actually does, frankly, to deplete resources we need. So if we have people rushing into every emergency room in the U.S. when they get flu symptoms, we're going to have a bigger problem on our hand, and those who actually need the help will not be able to get it. So,
yeah, Katrina, that's a fair point. I mean, I understand that where you are, there's legitimate concerns, and there may be legitimate concerns coming to New York as well. But is it necessarily smart to conflate the horrors in Africa with what might happen here when we're talking about different strains? Making people scared only makes them perhaps make mistakes. And panic, you never actually follow proper hygiene when you're in panic.
Well, wouldn't it be more appropriate to be concerned and maybe a little bit panicky than just, you know, letting the man walk out of a hospital clearly displaying the symptoms of the disease?
Absolutely.
And again, the strain is really important, because if it's the restaurant strain, then we know through studies that that strain can be carried by canines. They're a vector, asymptomatic, just like fruit bats. So there were witnesses that said they saw dogs licking his vomit up out of the street. We should be concerned about that. And when you have a president who refuses to restrict travel from that area, they say both things. They say it's going to be difficult to get it here. Restricting travel is not going to keep it from coming here, but it came here because of travel. So none of this really makes any sense. So for the parents here in Dallas County, this is just unacceptable, considering it's not just Ebola we're dealing with. You mentioned the retrovirus. We have the enterovirus. There are so many things happening right here in Texas because we have officials, we have government telling us they know what's best for us, and we're just not going to accept that.
Marjorie, last word to you.
I would love to see the government shut down travel and how companies and individuals would respond to that. I mean, look, President Obama is not a physician, and I think blaming any administration, again, like blaming Bush for Katrina, would be the wrong thing to do. The CDC is the physicians. They are the experts, and I think trusting that they're containing it, that they're observing it, and that our medical professionals, which are among the best in the world, are watching it, is probably the way I would go.
Yeah, and the other thing to end this is that I'm having a problem with the all or nothing setup of this debate. We either shut down travel or we don't. Why can't we send health workers in and make sure they have a way out? I don't see why we have to say all or nothing. All right, we got to go. Ladies, thanks. Directly ahead, scandals, blunders, and expensive parties. No, it's not a typical Saturday night at my underwater mansion. It's the president's schedule, a factor analysis of Mr. Obama's fundraising blitz as the bad news piles up in a moment.